This is TWiT.
I don't know who's at fault here, but we're going to dive into it. Google's new Pixel hardware is starting to magically appear in people's hands, but the experience of a number of reviewers that had early access has given eager Pixel owners pause as quality controls come into question for these devices. Joining us to share his experience with the new Pixel 2 devices is Stephen Hall from 9 to 5 Google. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to get you here. So there have been a number of issues that some reviewers have been having, yourself included, pointed to in the reviews, but the biggest issue seems to be that of screen burn-in. At least I feel like of all the kind of quality concerns on these new devices, screen burn-in seems to be the most alarming. You actually experienced this on the device that you've been using. Why don't you first just start off by telling us a little bit about your usage, kind of what you were putting it through and what you saw as a result?
Okay, so this is a pretty complex problem, I'd say. I mean, the Pixel XL 2, the Pixel 2 XL, sorry, is we're finding that it's unfortunately has more problems or more differences, I should say, compared to the smaller Pixel 2 than we would have hoped. But the screen issue is you can kind of divide it into a few different categories. There's things that we might say are quality control problems. So there might be variance between screens that are coming out of the factory. And then there's some complaints that people have had with the actual color of the display, which in comparison to the typically very vibrant Samsung displays, it looks a little dull to some people. And then there's the burn-in issue, which also might be a quality control issue. We don't really know yet. So far, all Google has said is that they're investigating. I personally, as you can see here on the screen, I had a Pixel that we had used for about a week. And it's still not clear kind of what is image retention, which would be, a temporary state of the screen holding on to the image that obviously right here in the image we're showing the navigation bar down here at the bottom. It's hard to tell between the difference of image retention, which is temporary, and an actual burn-in, which is not exactly unheard of with OLED displays. But with the Pixel 2, we're probably just mostly disappointed to be seeing problems with image retention, which itself is not good, but especially not burn-in this early in the game.
Well, so that's what's confusing me. So it's image retention or image persistence, which is temporary, but won't it technically be permanent? I mean, because that image of the home button, that imaginary home button, is there most of the time. So is it? I mean, it's not really temporary at all, right?
Well, so my unit, my first unit, kind of has both problems, it seems like. So whenever I pull up this gray image that will kind of reveal the ghosting that I'm seeing at the bottom of the screen, if I let that image sit there for maybe 10, 15 minutes, I start to see that ghosting start to fade, which if this was purely image retention, then if we played, a video for half an hour on the screen and then we popped back over to this gray image, then it should be completely gone in theory if this is image retention, which we have seen on some of LG's TV panels. But I think that it's probably both in my case, which is concerning, obviously, to see this early, because even after I run tests, kind of trying to, so to speak, reset the pixels, after 20 or 30 minutes of trying to flash different colors on the screen or play a video, I still am able to see on this first unit I got some ghosting, which would suggest, again, I don't want to jump to conclusions because Google hasn't said anything officially, but that would suggest that there is some amount of actual permanent burn-in happening here.
And you're seeing this when you use that gray image, not necessarily when you're doing other things. Like it's bad that it's there at all, but you aren't noticing this throughout the rest of your experience.
Right, and that's a big point. Yeah, that's a big point to bring up here, not just with this issue, but the blue tint issue we can talk about in a second, is that this is probably not going to be something that normal users will notice. It's just kind of, this is an $850 phone, and we're all, I especially, and people have kind of gotten onto me for this, I'm looking at it under a microscope, and I really want to know what you're getting, especially when you compare the phone to the smaller Pixel 2, which in theory should be identical, right, in quality.
Right.
So do you think that, I mean, that normal people won't notice this, but But the fact that, I mean, it started with review units like yours, and a lot of the early adopters, the people that, ordered it right away, those aren't normal people. And so in a way, is the damage done, or do they just need to get through these first few weeks? And do you think that's why Google hasn't said anything else? Because the more they say, the more it will spread to, non-tech journalists.
The normals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's two sides of this argument. I mean, one side of the argument is that, any normal buyer is going to just pick up the Pixel XL for $850. Especially someone who's not a tech enthusiast is just going to pick it up, and they might notice. Honestly, I think the blue tint issue is probably the thing that most people would probably notice right out of the gate, because we haven't really seen that on any other comparable phones. Well, we've seen it, but we've never seen it to the degree that we're seeing it. But yeah, I mean, I think that the other side of the so like one side is like this is not that big of a problem, and that normal people won't notice it, and the other side is, a lot of people, if they're spending $850 on the phone, they're probably going to be the kind of people who really want to, they want to know that what they're getting is a really good quality product. And I think it's fair. We've seen some publications kind of pull their review scores. In a way, I can understand that, because they're evaluating the product for buyers. And I think that, last year we were able to say Pixel and Pixel XL, they were the same phone. Only difference was the screen size, more or less. They had their own little manufacturing issues. We covered them. Other publications covered them. But, all the problems were resolved within a month. Both phones were the same. But now kind of the problem with this generation is that, and this is kind of a bigger problem, in my opinion, for kind of Google trying to build their brand image, is that the Pixel 2 and the Pixel 2 XL are really not the same phone. I mean, every day we learn about a new, very minor, I'll admit, very minor discrepancy between the two, but a discrepancy nonetheless.
Yeah.
So I can see like both sides of the argument here.
Yeah, I can understand that as well. Now you're mentioning the blue tint. I will preface this by saying on All About Android on Tuesday, I got very limited time. Florence Ion brought in both devices, so I got like maybe 5 to 10 minutes of hands-on time. But we did take a look, and I did see the bluish tint, especially when you're kind of off axis on it. But I mean, I've used a lot of devices, and I've noticed that off axis kind of view of screens often kind of tilts the color spectrum, reduces the brightness and everything. Do you think that a lot of people are going to notice that? Like, I feel like you notice that when you compare it to another screen side by side, but I mean, other than enthusiasts, the general person is just going to be like, oh, that's just the screen, whatever.
Oh yeah, that's definitely possible. I just think my concern, as someone who is looking at these under the microscope, I mean, the LG V30, as some have noted, has a similar panel, most likely coming out of a similar or maybe even the same exact factory. And people have compared them side by side, and seeing the blue tint is normal. It's normal to a degree. All OLED panels, or most OLED panels, you'll see, some kind of off-axis discoloration. Yeah. But with the Pixel 2 XL, my concern is, one, the smaller Pixel 2 doesn't have this problem. The Pixel 1 and Pixel 1 XL don't have this problem, as far as I can tell, until you get to extreme angles. Whereas the Pixel 2 XL, even unlike the V30, which should have a similar panel, it takes a lot more of an extreme off-axis like angle before you notice the blue discoloration. And for the Pixel 2 XL, at least with my units, there could be variants. I'm not sure. Once again, this is another thing we have to wait for Google to tell us about. But at least on my units, it's kind of jarring, especially at night, looking at the screen in bed, with the lights off. It's pretty jarring whenever you barely tilt the phone and it just kind of goes all blue. Or if you're sitting at your desk, and this is a normal use case where you're scrolling through notifications and looking at the phone, it's straight on, it's fine. But looking at the angle, even sitting at a desk, it looks like completely blue, which is, like I said, not the case with the standard Pixel 2.
Right. And obviously, I mean, for those who don't know what's behind these devices, the larger one produced by HTC underneath, the smaller one. No, sorry, other way around. Smaller one by HTC, larger one by LG. So that can explain, some of these differences that we're seeing. We're also hearing about a balance issue between both of the front-facing speakers. Some people are complaining about clicks that are being heard.
Hissing.
Hissing, It just gets worse and worse. I mean, what does this say about Google's kind of quality control, approach to quality control? It really seems like they dropped the ball on this one.
Well, I mean, anyone who's been using Google hardware up to today, I mean, look at the Nexus 5X, the Nexus 6P, all the way back to, even the earlier Nexus devices. They've been made by a plethora of different manufacturers. They've all had their problems.
Yeah,
pretty much all of them have had their problems. I mean, we have Nexus 5X, which has boot loop problems. People are they have brick devices in their drawers because the quality of the hardware is just that poor and just doesn't last that long. Yeah. Nexus 6P has battery problems. So, I mean, really, my thing is not that there are quality control concerns. It's that it's kind of disappointing to see Google, who came out and said last year, these phones are made by Google. We're not going to place the blame. If things go wrong, we're not going to send you to Huawei support, which they did with the Nexus 6P. Last year, they came out and said, these are made by Google. Rick Osterloh comes out on stage and he talks about his philosophy for AI and how hardware is really not that big of a deal and it's really hard to differentiate in hardware. Well, last year, that hardware, the Pixel and the Pixel XL, were, in my opinion, in some ways, higher quality, and it seemed like there was a much closer eye and a much closer attention to detail, making sure that these come out of the factory and into people's hands, working right. And not having these weird design discrepancies. For me, the concern is just it's really disappointing to see in a way, whereas, the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL are, leaps and bounds ahead of the Pixel 1 in terms of specifications and, performance and stuff. Well, maybe not leaps and bounds, but they're an improvement, right? Yeah. It's just important to see. I mean, it's disappointing to me to see that there's these weird quality control problems happening a year later when this year, in my opinion, should have been kind of a refinement of last year, not kind of resurrecting the problems of the Nexus days.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It really does seem like they've kind of taken a step backward, at least through these early experiences. It's kind of tainted a little bit this larger device. And I've seen a lot of people online that are just like, I'm canceling my order or I'm thinking about canceling my order. Thankfully, you get a little bit of a window when you buy through Google directly. So at least you have that. Maybe get it, see how your device fares and go from there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to thank you, but if you have something to add on to that, go for it.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just going to say, like, Google is, they're charging $850 for this device, and they're trying to take on Samsung, which is their own partner, and they're trying to take on Apple with the iPhone 8 Plus. So if they're going to charge $850, I think it's justifiable to say, to compare the devices against the competition, and obviously, according to those of us that are looking at it under the microscope, the devices are kind of disappointing. But like some have said, as a final note, most people taking these devices out of the box, they're going to love them. I mean, this is just us looking at these devices and looking at these minor problems and trying to pick them apart. But honestly, the Pixel has so many great advantages. I mean, the camera, just the performance of the phones versus every other Android phone on the market, it's just night and day, in my opinion. There's just so many things about this that kind of make them more iPhone-like in terms of, quality and attention to detail on the software side of things and other things like the camera, that I think a lot of people, regardless of these issues, they're going to take these out of the box and they're going to love them. So,
Yep, and we'll see how far that takes Google with sales this time around. So, Stephen Hall, 9to5google.com. Thank you so much, Stephen. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.